Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Optimize Your Peering and Infrastructure Investments. I'm Jordan Sloop, your host from Kentik Marketing. So today, Nina Bargisen, Kentik Tech Evangelist, will demonstrate how to dig deeper into your connectivity and select the right peers for your network. So during the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the Zoom chat, and we will answer all of them at the end of the presentation. So with that, Nina, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Jordan, and hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today to talk a little bit more about optimizing peering and a little bit about your hardware as well. First thing we're going to do is to start with a poll. And I just want to know, is there anybody here who have peered before, or is your network new to peering? So Jordan will pull up the poll and we'll see how it goes. Right. So we're all old in peering. So some of the things I'll be talking about here might not be super cool, but I think everybody can benefit from trying to rethink the peering situation from the beginning. But the first thing we're going to talk about is that what happens when you run into limitations on your hardware. And the people in this room will then be aware that when you start peering, or when you do peer, you kind of outsource the processing of the routing table into finding the destinations, the best routes to the destinations on the internet to your transit provider. They collect all the information from all their peers and then calculate it and send that result to you as their routing table. Now, when you start peering, you have to do that yourself. And maybe sometimes people run into the issue that their hardware is simply not strong enough, because they will now have to take a lot of more sources, a lot of more routing tables, and do the calculations of the best path themselves. So what can happen is that the memory and the CPU in the routing engine, or just on the router, becomes overloaded with the result that the flapping sessions, dropped packets, and outages, and most of all, time for your network engineers to figure out what is going on. So if you're not already monitoring your network, when you peer, it's a good idea to monitor your devices and monitor the resources on the devices to make sure that you're not running out of memory. And if you do, then figure out what to do. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, what can we do when our hardware is not strong enough for the peering situation we have set up? So just here is an example of a CPU that's running really hot in our example network. And the reason is that this network just started peering on a internet exchange, and it's just setting up one session with the route server, and is getting all the participants' announcements into the router, and need to calculate the best path to all the destinations. So what can we do? Well, we can we can buy new hardware. But if we can't do that, we could try and reduce the number of prefixes, because there is not always a correlation between the number of prefixes the peer is announcing and the amount of traffic you have to send to them, that you send to them. They could be deaggregating their prefixes just to make traffic engineering and try to force the traffic in that direction. And there might not be traffic to all of the prefixes in their table. So what I suggest that we do is that we look at our traffic coming in from the IX, look at who has the most traffic and who has the most prefixes, and then maybe start sorting or finding solution that way. So here we have then used our Data Explorer in the tool, and are just looking at the destination next hop AS number. So that is basically the peer, but not at where is the traffic really going, just where are we, which ASN are we handing it off to on the IX. And we have filtered down to, in this example, which is on made-up data, to NAB Africa in Africa. because why not talk a little bit about Africa? So a route server, I said. So I guess most of you on this call will know what a route server is, but a quick reminder is that it is a server, it is a router on the Internet Exchange. So the participants are all connected to the Internet Exchange and could set up bilateral peering. Then will they have to maintain a session to each of the peers. You can also, if there is a route server available, just with one session, get the routes from all the participants on the route server. And that way have only one session to maintain and keep an eye on, but getting a really huge table of the routes announced to you. Traffic never flows to the route server or through the route server. It will go directly to the ASNs. This is due to the way that P2P is configured on the route server, and why it's how it's defined. So if we go back to the picture we had before, we had I spotted that we had Telkom South Africa with a lot of traffic, and we had a Telkom internet as well, and wonder maybe these two networks might be connected. Or we can also just go through each of the providers, each of the ASNs in the table and have a look at who are their customers. Are there any of these customers who are also an ASN that we see on this route server? In this case, we have Telkom. We go in and we have a look in KMI, and we see that Telkom Internet is a customer and even a single home customer of Telkom South Africa. So, maybe there's something here we can see, but maybe not. Depends on the number of prefixes they have. So let's have a look at that. So yeah, Telkom Internet. So if we have a look at Telkom Internet, this is the detail in the detail tab in the market intelligence. We can see that the number of originated prefixes that is seen in the global routing table is almost 2,000. And if we look at Telkom South Africa, which was the provider, the originated is 93, and the transit is only 970. So that means if we use this relationship and want to reach Telkom Internet through Telkom, we can save ourselves from having these 2,000 prefixes coming into our router and take part of the calculation. So yeah, so this is what we can find a solution on how to do that. So there are two ways we can filter. So we can filter the incoming prefixes on the session to the route server. So setting up a filter, filtering away everything that comes from Telkom Internet, or maybe do a filter that only accepts the ones that we choose to accept. And that way we will have sort of one-sided selective peering policy. We should only do this when there is very little traffic going in the direction that is affected by the filtering. So which is, in this case, going from your network to them when you remove their prefixes from the calculation, because then you will be sending a small amount of traffic over their provider and into there, so onto a paid connection. We want to be mindful of that and make sure that they're okay with that. So maybe reach out, or maybe also have a look at how is the traffic flow in the other direction. If they have a large amount of traffic to us, maybe they're still happy because they can still send that directly if you choose the filtering solution on the route server. If that's also a small one, or if the traffic flows are sort of even, maybe a better solution would be to not announce your prefixes to that network either. And you can do that either with a routing server that has these features, which might be on some IXPs, or by choosing to not use route servers and go and only peer with a few ASNs where you have a high enough traffic volume compared to the number of prefixes they're announcing you. So it's all a balance, and it's all about trying to guess what is going on the other side of the table, and how happy will they be with this solution that you decide to do. And again, best part is go have a chat with them and talk about your issues. So if you choose to do this and you choose to put some of the traffic interest that you have, even though it's a small amount of traffic, you still want to make sure that you can monitor the quality of the traffic going to that ASN. And in Kentik, we have created an ASN monitoring test in the synthetics platform. And what that does, what we can do with that is that we can pick an ASN and say, I want to monitor this ASN. So in the configuration, we pick the ASN and we choose, should we pick it, should we monitor it by outbound or inbound traffic? What is the most important? So we will look at what is the traffic direction we want to make sure is running well. And in this case, it will be on the outbound. And then what happens is that the Kentik tool will go in and scan the traffic flow going to that ASN and pick the top talkers on each of the interfaces that goes not only just on the IX interface that we were talking about, but on any external interface in your network. It will see what are the paths going to this network do we have in our network or in our in our network, and then find the top talkers and then set up synthetic testing the trace route, the delay, the round trip time, and the jitter to those destinations. And every hour, we will do it again. Rescan, are these still the top talkers? If it has changed, set up the test to the new top talkers, because we want to make sure that the destinations are still the relevant ones. So the ones that traffic is flowing to in your relationship with this peer. So this is just an example of the result that you can get back from an ASN test. This is a little bit more complicated than the diagram we drawn before. There's a lot more hops. And this should give you a warning, there is so much more hops, and we were only counting on maybe 2 or 3 hops going from the source to the destination. So maybe we should check if everything is still like it was before. And if it isn't, we have been told it wasn't, should we change anything? Maybe remove the filters, maybe find another solution. So the next optimization we're going to look at is, so we're not talking about any more hardware. Now we're assuming we have the right hardware. Finally, we got delivered, or we got the budget for it. So now we want to go in and look at the IX or on all of our peerings in general and say, can we optimize? Can we do this better than it is right now? So the Find Peers workflow is made for that. And what it does here is that it shows you per pop, per type of connection, and per connected provider you have on those type of connections, what are the destination ASNs behind that? And vice versa, you can go it in the inbound direction as well. So here on this made up data that we are looking at here, we can see that, well, we have a paid private peering going to Pixnet, and then going to AT&T. And well, in our made up world, it would be a good idea to go to AT&T and say, hey, should we not connect directly? In the real world, maybe that's not the best network to reach out to, but maybe someday it will happen. So every now and then, maybe once a month, indeed, every time you need to think about upgrading, you need to think about changing any topology, just go in, run the reports, and figure out, is there somebody we should be connected to that we're not connected to right now? And then reach out and fix it. The tool can help you figure out where you can connect to it. In particular, if we're at the time where we're no longer just using IXs, but we're also looking at setting up private peerings. So growing a little bit from the first example we had where we were just peering with a route server at an IXP. Imagine here we're still maybe peering with a route server, we're at an IXP, but when should we then move to private peering? Maybe it is when our traffic flows are big enough. A rule of thumb is that if you have a flow that is driving an upgrade of your IX port, maybe it would be a good idea to just move that flow away and then give that a dedicated port, and then you can continue on the same capacity on your IX port. If that's going to run full in a month or two anyways, you might as well upgrade the IX port and then save the port and save the cross connect to do a private peering. If you want to do private peering, PeeringDB is your place to go, also for IXP connectivity, as you might know. PeeringDB is a community-run database where networks who take peering seriously are filling in their data about which IXPs they're connected to, which data centers they have private peering available, what their contacts are, both the not contacts and the contacts for peering, and the number of prefixes that they originate or expect to send. So it's a great resource to figure out where to connect to new networks. In the tool, we are pulling in some of that information. One of them is the shared facilities. So we can use the peering workflow to figure out, is there a common location with that potential peer where we can go and connect privately. The last thing I want to talk about is hairpins. If you want to look a little bit on how to prepare a conversation with a peer, in that webinar, we detected a hairpin in the analysis we were doing. And a hairpin is defined in a way where you have a traffic exchange between two networks, but the source and destination are not really that far from each other, but it has to travel a long distance to get exchanged. So in this example we have here, traffic from New York is going to Chicago to be handed over to the other network and then going back to New York. So is there a way that we can use the Kentik tool to find these cases? And there is. I've tried to build a query here on some made-up data where I'm looking at country and city, and then we can add the site and the site of the country. And then we add the ultimate exit site, which is the site where the traffic is leaving our network again. This is a term that Kentik have made up. And what we do is that we look at when the traffic flow is entering our network, we look up the routing table from that entry site and see where is this destination being routed to exit our network. And then we can find the ultimate exit site that way, and then map it out geographically as well. So I'm using those dimensions in the query, and then also adding the destination country and the destination city, just to make sure that we get all the information. Be aware, though, that all of the country and the city mapping that we have are based on their geolocation information about the prefixes. So when we find something, maybe we should also have a deeper look into, could it be the geographic mapping that is wrong? But let's talk about that a little bit later. So basically, here is the result of the query. And the thing that we spot is that we do have some prefixes originated in Sweden, entering into our network in Norway, and then sent back to Sweden, handed over to a peer in Sweden, and then sent up to Norway. So this seems like a bad idea. you're sort of like going Sweden's addresses in Norway, back to Sweden, and then back to Norway. So here's some traffic flow that we should look a little bit more careful at. Maybe check the geolocation of the prefixes. And if we can see it is a hairpin, reach out to the peer and say, can we find a better solution? So this is for me, it is part of the regular optimizations or monitoring that you should do is traffic. Are there any networks you should peer with on your different IXs or your different locations? Are there any hairpins? Are there any bad routings? And do that on a regular basis to make sure that your traffic is always flowing optimally. So to sum up, make sure you monitor your hardware and detect if there's any issues with resources on the hardware. And if there is, you can, for that location, move over to a more selective peering policy and then upgrade the hardware when you have the budget and the equipment available. Make sure always to monitor the quality of the paths, not only when you do that, but maybe always to make sure that traffic is routed as you're expecting it. It's another way to detect the hairpins I was talking about, and review the traffic regularly, move big flows to direct peering, or in general, monitor if you're directly connected to the networks where you have a significant amount of traffic either coming to or sending to. And look for the bad routing always and fix it as soon as you detect it. And with that, I am concluding my talk and available for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Nina. That was a great presentation. So a few questions did come in via the chat, so let's open the Q&A panel now. So the first question is, are you using KMI to see the number of prefixes? Why not just look at my BGP sessions on the router?
That is a great question. And if I was a router doggy and I had access to the command line on the router, that is definitely a thing I could do if I had all the peering connections as bilateral peerings, because then it would be easy to get the overview of how many prefixes are sent to me from each of the peers. But when you're connecting to a route server, you only have one session and you're getting all the prefixes. So it takes a little bit more CLI gymnastics to count the prefixes per ASN. And often the peering coordinator is not even allowed to log into the routers and do this kind of analysis. So we have to look for another source of data. And the KMI is looking at counting all the prefixes that we are seeing originating in the ASNs in the global table. So it's a great source to give you an indication on the amount of prefixes you get from that particular ASN.
Awesome. So the next question is, why do you need to recalculate the targets in the ASN and monitoring test?
That's a good question as well. And it is because it is to take into account the changes that happens all the time on the internet. So remember, I told you that the destinations for the test was found by scanning the traffic flow that's going to that ASN. So that means that we might see a flow that's temporary, and then we would start monitoring that traffic. But maybe that destination is not relevant for the next 5 days because they're not really using their connectivity. So there's no reason to use that one as a flow. We want to make sure that we're constantly monitoring the relevant addresses. So that's why we're scanning for the top talkers every hour. It's configurable how often you want to scan for it, but the default setting is 1 hour.
Great. So it looks like that was just about all of our questions, and we're just about to come up on time here. So we'd like to thank everyone for joining in today, and we've covered quite a bit of material. This webinar was recorded, so you can review a replay of it on our website. That is kentik.com, and please share it with your interested colleagues. So in the next couple of days, you will get an email from us as well, so you can review the content, get a link to the recording, and get any other additional information that you'd like. So if you have further questions, please email us at webinars@kentik.com. And thank you all again for joining, and we hope to see you all again soon. And thank you again, Nina.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you all. Thank you.